You guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. What I'm going to be talking about today is the first full moon of 2025. And boy, oh boy, is this a strong one. Okay. This full moon takes place on Monday, January 13th. It peaks at 2:26 p.m. Pacific time. And this takes place in the sign of Cancer. Okay. Now, which is normally a beautiful place for a full moon because the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So when she's transiting through the sign of Cancer, she's transiting through her own home and she can work gracefully there. Definitely can be a very emotional energy. But what's going on with this full moon is it's very strongly conjunct Mars, which is in retrograde. Okay. And Mars is what can influence things like frustrations and anger and all kinds of emotional turbulence can come out of this. So really, I think what I'm going to focus on for this full moon is how to work with this energy, like how we can benefit from this transit. I will say this, I say with a whole heck of a lot of confidence that 2025 is going to be an emotional, turbulent year for a whole heck of a lot of people. Okay, if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to go back and review my, what did I title it? The 2025 astrology forecast video a couple of videos ago. Okay, where I talk about this year, how there's so much going on. I mean, stuff that just doesn't happen. Okay, we've got the three power players, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all changing zodiac signs with basically in a few months of each other, which that just doesn't happen. Okay, not only we basically got everything changing signs this year, which really does not happen very often. And I do think it's going to set off a lot of really powerful energies that will bring great change, but I think it's going to put some people through some kind of a roller coaster ride. Okay, so I feel like this is a really good time to be talking about how to work with this full moon. Okay, so first of all, what I'll do is this is the peak of a growth cycle. Okay, a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Cancer. Now, over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing this opportunity for growth that's related to the sign of Cancer. And this is a time to honor that growth. But this is also a time as soon as the moon begins to wane, if we set the intentions beforehand, this is something I've been doing for so many years now, and I would not preach about this stuff if I didn't see the results coming from it. So we set the intentions for when the moon is starting to wane, to let go of any of this Cancerian energy that just may not be serving us. Okay. Another thing full moons can do is they can shine light. They can make you realize something that you hadn't realized before. If you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which area of your own life this is specifically manifesting for you. Okay, even if you have nothing in the sign of Cancer, it's still coming through somewhere in your natal chart. Maybe your house of health, or your house of karma, or your house of communication, your house of relationships, your house of money, your house of higher learning, your house of career. It's got to be coming through somewhere in your own natal chart. So what I've been doing for so many years, I pull out every time we have a full moon, I pull out my journal, I write down the growth that I'm grateful for that's related to that zodiac sign that the moon is transiting through. I also write down what I want to let go of. And then I apply that to the area of my life that I know it's coming through in my own natal chart. Okay, so there's that. So with that said, I'm going to break down the sign of Cancer for you in pretty good detail for you. And then I'm also going to be pulling up the chart and showing you some very prominent aspects that are going on with this full moon, show you a little bit of the mechanics of how this full moon works. I'm also going to be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Cancer, because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime anything up in the sky transits through the sign of Cancer. And for this full moon, again, it's like the full moon very close to Mars in retrograde. So it's a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body, especially if you've got anything in the sign of Cancer, or really any of the water signs. Okay, Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces. And with that said, I will also be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body during this kind of transit, and even just not necessarily only for this kind of transit, but if you've got something, I imagine if you got Cancer energy in your natal chart, that might be why you're here watching this. So you might want to look into some of these remedies for yourself. Okay, and I will also be talking about gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Cancer. What I always like to do is after I make my little journal entry, I like to take a few gemstones that resonate well with the astrological courses we're receiving and put them on top of my journal. I always leave a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below. If you don't have any gemstones, that's perfectly okay. Don't feel like you're missing out on anything. Again, this is something I've been doing for so many years, so I've accumulated a lot of gemstones into my life. by writing down in my journal when we have a new moon, I am manifesting, clear crystal quartz, whatever it is you want to manifest. That's for the new moon. Okay. Which we have a new moon every single month. So you got plenty of opportunities for that. So let's get into this. This sign of Cancer, this is what we call the cardinal water sign. When I say cardinal, I'm talking about a force that comes through. Okay, this is actually a very strong energy. We'll get deeper into that. That force that comes through with the cardinal signs is strong, but it's in the element of water, which water is very directly associated with emotions and feelings in Western astrology, okay? All the water signs are associated with all the feels, okay? The sign of Cancer, the motto is I feel, okay? It's the sign that very natural empathy, okay? A lot of people have got anything in the sign of Cancer, maybe not so much Saturn, but you got anything, I mean, really even Saturn and Cancer can kind of go through this, where they feel what other people are feeling. It's a very intuitive energy. It's ruled by the moon, okay? The moon is what influences our emotions and our moods and our intuition. It's like, that's why when we have a full moon, a lot of people, especially the sensitive ones, have an even stronger tendency to feel what's going on with other people around them. If you are already a sensitive person, you might want to consider avoiding going into any kind of situation that could be slightly toxic for you, because more than likely you're going to be feeling what's going on around you. Okay. Everybody has the moon somewhere in their natal chart. When we're born, the moon has got to be somewhere in the sky. And whatever zodiac sign the moon's beaming through when we are born, will say a lot about how we process our emotions and our moods and our intuition and our level of receptivity. That's why that sign of Cancer being ruled by the moon, that's in part anyway, why the sign of Cancer is very sensitive and emotional. But again, it's also strong. Okay. It's a protective energy. It's like the mother of the zodiac. Okay. Meaning, like a mother can be so protective with her children. Also, the mother can be very intuitive with her children. Again, this sign of Cancer is very much recognized for intuition, but also protection. Represented by the crab. Okay, the crab there's a couple things that go on here. A few things that go on here. First of all, the crab that wears this very hard protective shell that can't be penetrated, it needs to, because the insides are so soft and sensitive and squishy. Okay, you'll notice a lot of people have strong Cancerian placements in their chart. And this could literally be Sun in Cancer, Moon in Cancer, Mars in Cancer, Cancer rising, even a little bit like Mercury in Cancer. It just kind of depends on how it shows up in your natal chart. But you will notice that they have to protect themselves. They will wear this hard protective boundary around themselves. Again, that's that crab energy. But also the crab, when there's something scary going on out there, sometimes this crab can scurry away because it's like, ooh, I don't want to feel this. But also, it's the most adorable thing ever. If you haven't seen a video of a crab protecting another crab, it is freaking adorable. Okay, crabs, I didn't know this up until fairly recently, that crabs are actually very, very protective of each other. Okay, and you'll notice a lot of people who've got strong Cancerian placements in their chart will be very protective of others, their loved ones or strangers. And I'll just tell you right off the bat that I am somebody, I literally cannot stand confrontation. I don't like it at all. My moon is in the sign of Cancer. I think a lot of that not liking confrontation is because my sun is in Pisces. But going back to the fact that my moon and my Mars are conjunct in my own natal chart, okay, I am insanely protective of people who are in a situation where they could use the protection. And of course, it's with family members. But I've also caught myself, this goes back to when I was young and in high school and standing up for people who couldn't really protect themselves, okay? Not necessarily with physical force, but more just, I can't help it. I got to protect people that need it. And that is a very Cancerian placement, okay? Okay, so how have you grown in these ways? First of all, one thing I would be thinking about is checking in with how we handle our emotions. Like I said, I do feel like 2025 is going to be pretty emotional year for quite a few people. I mean, it's already we've already got a good start to that. And by the way, thank you so much for all the people who have reached out to make sure that I'm doing okay. I do live in California, but it's like a 5-hour drive south to Los Angeles from where I live in California. So the fires are quite a bit of distance from me, but it's tragic. It's tragic to see it start the year out like this. Regardless, I think there's going to be a lot of that going on this year. So checking in with how we're handling emotional turbulence, checking in with ourselves. Are we handling it in a healthy way? Okay, of course, nobody wants, it's just not healthy at all to suppress emotions. We have to feel them, but to meditate through that, okay? Work your way through it. And not only that, but how have you grown in these ways of empathy, being able to actually really have true empathy for our fellow humans, okay? No matter what kind of disagreements, political sides and all that crap, being able to understand, everybody's been programmed with all different types of information. I think it's a good idea that we do protect each other and have real true empathy towards each other, okay? But also, maybe you've been a little too emotional, okay? Maybe this might, again, setting the intentions. If you set the intentions before this lunar transit, and if you miss it, if you're seeing this video a couple days after, it's better late than never to set the intentions to let go of, being a little too emotionally aggressive about things, okay? Having easy triggers and that sort of thing. Might want to set the intentions to let some of that go. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up the chart here. And for those of you who are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. Again, this is Monday, January 13th, 2025, peaks at 2:26 p.m. Pacific time. You might want to see what time this actually comes through for your own location. Okay, so, and what I mean by that is time zone. Okay, now, let's start over here. Here's the moon. Okay, there's the symbol for the moon. Right here is the glyph for the sign of Cancer, and exactly opposite that is the sun over here in the sign of Capricorn. Now, to get really specific here, the sun is at 23 degrees, 59 minutes Capricorn, and the moon is at 23 degrees, 59 minutes Cancer. The sign of Cancer and Capricorn are opposite each other, always and forever. That doesn't change, okay? And that's what happens every time we have a full moon. The sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other. Now, this is really close to 24 degrees Cancer and Capricorn. Let's see, we got about 6 days left of Capricorn season. Happy solar return season to all of you Capricorns out there. But this is in part why full moons are so incredibly powerful and why we all feel each other so much more when we have a full moon, because the two brightest lights in the sky are facing each other. Not only that, but it's also when we think about that peak of that growth cycle and embracing this Cancerian growth, that's basically what the sun and the moon are doing. They're embracing the growth of this, okay? It's the peak of a growth cycle. But right off the bat here, so again, to be clear, when the moon transits through the sign of Cancer, which the moon goes through every single zodiac sign every single month, okay? But generally speaking, we only have one full moon per zodiac time, per zodiac sign per year. And generally speaking, when the moon does transit through the sign of Cancer, it's a lovely time, okay? Might be a little hypersensitive, but at the same time, she's in her own home. Okay, but here, we see Mars in retrograde. That's what that little symbol is there, showing us that Mars is in retrograde and in the sign of Cancer. Mars doesn't really like to be in the sign of Cancer because Mars, if you just look at the symbol for Mars, it's like Mars wants to penetrate. Mars is aggressive. Mars is the planet of war. Okay, Mars is what influence. I don't mean to make Mars sound bad. Mars is great. We need Mars. Mars is what makes us take action. Mars is what rules our muscles and our adrenal glands. Okay, Mars is when somebody's got a really strong Mars in their natal chart, you'll see they're competitive and they're athletic and that sort of thing. Mars is great for that, but in medical astrology, Mars actually rules things like injuries, things like a bee sting even, or something that's like, an injury that happens quickly, okay? Mars can also have a lot to do with like the cutting, like a knife and cutting something open. That's very Martian energy. And then when we think about the sign of Cancer, I feel, this very sensitive energy. It's, again, as somebody who's born with Moon and Mars and Cancer, I completely understand that it's why Mars there's some definitely like beautiful things about it. I feel good about wanting to protect people, with Mars and Cancer conjunct Moon. But at the same time, it's just not Mars's favorite place to be. In fact, just opposite that over here in the sign of Capricorn, that's Mars's favorite place to be. That's where Mars exalts. So he's in the opposite sign of that. Okay, so there's that. Could be aggressive emotions coming through here. In fact, just as the hours pass through after this full moon peaks, the moon is going to cross over. And keep in mind, Mars is in retrograde. When you think about Mars, just picture some sort of a super aggressive dude who's just pissed and he's driving a big old, muscle car of sorts, and he throws it in reverse and now he's driving backwards. Okay, that's kind of what Mars retrograde is. As again, then also modify it with the sensitive sign of Cancer coming through, and the full moon shines over that. The moon disposits. The moon, whatever the moon is crossing over, she's bringing in more of that celestial energy. Okay, so this is really strong stuff coming through here. Okay, thank goodness the sun over here is in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn's strong and steady and stable. So hallelujah for that. Where should we go next? Let's talk about all this Pisces energy right here, because there's some trines going on. So first of all, the North Node has just moved into the sign of Pisces. Okay, this happens on January 11th. And it's the North Node is what pumps energy in. Okay, it's going to be going to the sign of Pisces. To get a little detailed here, the nodes basically go backwards to the zodiac. So the North Node just moved from the sign of Aries into the sign of Pisces, and will be coming through at 29 degrees. That's the Anhydrite degree. Pisces is another very sensitive energy. If you look right here, you see where it's blue, that means it's a water sign. Over here where it's blue, that means it's a water sign. Again, the water signs are emotional and sensitive. So we've got that North Node pumping this even more emotional energy coming through the Anhydrite degree of the sign of Pisces. There's a lot of sensitivities going on here. Then we've got Neptune so close to the North Node. Neptune is the bringer of dreams and mysticism and delusions and illusions and magic and drugs and altered states of consciousness. Neptune is a very unearthly, dreamy, mystical, spiritual, in good ways and bad ways, energy. Okay. And Neptune also has a huge influence on our psychic capabilities. This is a very, very super hyper intuitive combination of transits going on here, because Neptune puts holes in our psychic boundaries. Neptune, if you look up Neptune in the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology, you will read all about how Neptune is like out of all the things up in the sky, Neptune is really what's most directly associated with having psychic capabilities and rules the sign of Pisces. So Neptune has been going through Pisces since 2012, but just now we've got full force with Neptune right next to the North Node, pumping this Piscean influence in, this dreamy, mystical, spiritual, intuitive, but also maybe a little foggy kind of energy. There could be a very strong tendency for things like escapism. When I say escapism, that could be so many different ways, whether it's with drugs and alcohol or just wanting to just hide from the world. Okay, which some of that, sure, hiding from the world can be a healthy process sometimes, but maybe not only to a certain degree. Okay, but so actually, let's start here. So these blue lines that are going from here to here, those are trines. Okay, what that means is these guys, they are harmonizing. It's quite lovely, to be honest with you. It's because this is, again, super mystical, spiritual, and this is hyper intuitive and emotional, and the combination of both, it's very, very sensitive. I do feel like a lot of people, it's like, especially for people who are already sensitive, like just be super mindful with yourself and careful with yourself, because you might be picking up on things that you might not want to be picking up on. But on the flip side of that, for people, say you're having some sort of a full moon ceremony with your friends and everything's magical and there's a fire burning and then this could be beautiful for that kind of an experience, okay? But we've also got Saturn here going through Pisces, which Saturn is the bringer of discipline and responsibilities. Saturn's cold and rigid and going through the sign of Pisces basically till 2026, February 2026. As again, I don't want to repeat myself too much. I've already made videos about this, but later on this year, Saturn and Neptune will peak into the sign of Aries, but then they retrograde back into Pisces for a little while. Okay, so Saturn is, I feel like for a lot of people, boy, oh boy, have I had a lot of Pisces clients, people who have been dealing with depression. I mean, on all different levels, depression, there's so many different levels of it, but Saturn is already cold and rigid, and Pisces is a very, very sensitive energy. Okay. But also on the plus side of this, I do feel like Saturn's kind of bringing, because that Piscean, too much Pisces energy could just like, I don't even know where I am in this world kind of thing. But I feel like Saturn going through Pisces is bringing a little bit more of like a harsh reality to that Piscean energy. And in some ways that could be good, because Saturn, with that harshness, that realization of, oh yeah, I have this very physical experience. I have to go to work. I have to, all those things that most people don't like and to do. Okay. Another thing that Saturn and again, I've already mentioned some of this in previous videos, but I do feel like Saturn going through Pisces could potentially help to bring an end to the opiate epidemic that's going on. The sign of Pisces can be very strongly associated with things like opiates, and Saturn doesn't like that. Saturn says, no, we need reality. Okay. But now we've also got Venus going through Pisces. This is beautiful. This is an exalted placement for Venus. This is her favorite place to be, because Venus is the planet of love. Venus wants harmony. Venus wants everybody to get along. Venus is, relationships, and Venus is almost a remedy for anything except for a sugar addiction, because Venus rules sugar. But that's Pisces is like the sign of oneness. Why can't we all just get along? And Venus going through Pisces, you'll notice a lot of people who are born with Venus and Pisces, they love the idea of oneness, everybody getting along. Okay. And not only that, but they can be very romantic, that sort of thing. So Venus is a little bit of a saving grace here. And not only that, but Venus being so close to Saturn, she can be a little bit, if you just picture Saturn as this old, rigidy, all the archetypes of Saturn are they're gnarly, old, rigid, creepy kind of. Saturn's got a bad rep in astrology. Individuals or men that are harsh and gnarly. Okay. Venus, picture an old, raunchy, just mean old man, and all of a sudden this lovely lady comes up to that, grumpy old man, and all of a sudden he tones it down a little bit. There's pros and cons to everything in astrology, but I do feel like Venus might be kind of softening Saturn up a little bit there. And not only that, but this is a loose orb, but still, these guys are kind of all trining each other. A lot of very strong, watery energy coming through here. And in fact, if you live near water, that is so interesting that those fires broke out in LA right before the North Node left of the sign of fire, Aries. But this could potentially, especially with Saturn and Mars, okay, they are what we refer to as the malefics. Okay, again, we need both of them. Without Saturn, nobody would take care of their responsibilities. Without Mars, nobody would be, getting exercise. Okay, so we do need them. Saturn's the bringer of chronic disease, but they're both going through water signs. And with that said, first of all, if you got a lot of water in your natal chart, you might want to be extra careful with yourself, your body, your environment, everything, so on and so forth. But if you live near water, you might want to just be a little bit careful about this, okay? I remember going back into this when Hurricane Helene went through. I mean, the whole thing with Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee, just about, 4 or 5 days before that whole event came through, that was also a time where we had Mars in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. And I remember saying, just be really careful, or if you live around water, this can be turbulent for water. Not suggesting that everybody who lives near water is going to experience a trouble or a problem, but it certainly can lead to that. Okay, now, let's see, where should we go next? Let's talk about Mercury. Here's Mercury going through the sign of Capricorn. And as I've said so many times before, this may not be Mercury's favorite sign to be in, but I certainly like Mercury in Capricorn. And the reason for that is because Mercury rules has a major influence on our nervous system and is basically how we receive information, the intake of information. Mercury's filing that information away into our consciousness. And then when we want to communicate that information, Mercury finds that file and brings it back out for us to communicate. It's like the intake of information and the output of information. And again, Capricorn is a stable, strong, structured energy. Okay, that's the cardinal, again, forceful, earth sign. Earth signs come with stability. A lot of people who are born with Mercury in Capricorn, they can be strong, like communicators. They can be very, like, they can speak calmly, collectedly, but with a force that comes through. Okay, so I do like Mercury there. If you've got anything near 7 degrees Capricorn, you might want to pay attention to your, your mental function and your nervous system as well. Okay, now let's move on to, let's talk about Pluto here. All right, so Pluto, now in the sign of Aquarius for the next 20 years, okay? Pluto, to summarizes, Pluto is the bringer of a death and rebirth process. Okay, now going through the sign of Aquarius, Aquarius's motto is I know. Okay, when we think about, honestly, when we think about all the things that we are now, it's finally coming out, all kinds of new information, all kinds of things that people did not realize before, things about celebrities and Hollywood and, trafficking, human trafficking, all these things we're being exposed to. It's like ripping apart our psyche, things that what this death and rebirth process of what people realizing that they have been completely, most people anyway, I know a lot of people are still stuck in, watching news and believing everything that's on the news, but most people are really starting to go, wait a minute here. I think we've been lied to about some stuff. And that I feel like Pluto going through Aquarius is going to make an even stronger impact on that, especially later on this year when Pluto trines Uranus, when Uranus enters into Gemini. That's going to be a heavy hitter for a lot of people. If you've got anything near 1 degree Aquarius, holy smokes, it might be time for an astrology reading because you're going through a death and rebirth process yourself. I mean, to a certain degree, we all are. But it's even stronger if you've got anything near where Pluto's beaming through, if you've got anything near 1 degree Aquarius. Okay, now let's talk about Chiron here. There's a little bit of a T-square going to Chiron. So here's Chiron, the wounded healer, still going through the sign of Aries for about another 1.5 years. Chiron wants us to heal from wounds, like trauma, from when we were children, or it is said that those wounds are coming from previous lifetimes. Beaming through the sign of Aries. Aries is the warrior. Aries is ruled by Mars, okay? Aries is the very, very strong cardinal, meaning forceful, fire sign. Fire is energy, okay? And it's the sign of self. So Chiron, and only that, but Chiron played a huge role in that total solar eclipse we had last April. So Chiron wants us to heal from these wounds, especially with ourself. By no means am I suggesting that people shouldn't ask for, guidance in their healing journey, but it takes a lot of willpower as well. And Chiron going through Aries really does offer us that. And this T-square here, what I'm talking about is these red lines that are going from here to here. Basically, it's the moon that is squaring Chiron, and then the sun that is also squaring Chiron. That's a force. That's the sun and the moon beaming their rays towards the wounded healer, saying, let's do this. Let's heal this stuff. Let's let go of this stuff that's no longer serving us. Let's make room for the new beginnings that will bring in a more powerful healing journey. Okay, now this right here is Uranus going through the sign of Taurus. So this is another one. I'm talking Uranus is going to move forward later on this year. I believe it's in July, might be July 9th. I think that probably is right, where it's this summer where Uranus moves into the sign of Gemini. But currently right now is in retrograde and at 23 degrees Taurus. Okay, Uranus influences abrupt, strange, unpredictable energy. It's like Uranus messes with our electromagnetic field, okay? Especially if you have anything in your natal chart and you're 23 degrees Taurus, this is a very, very strong transit for you. Not only because Uranus is sitting on that thing, but because the sun is basically exactly trining this. So Uranus is bringing these very abrupt and revolutionary changes to the sign of Taurus. Well, really to all of us, okay? But when I say the sign of Taurus, I'm talking about the things that Taurus, for lack of a better term, rules over. The sign of Taurus rules money, finances, also has a little bit to do with agriculture and food. The sign of Taurus actually rules the taste buds, rules this whole part of the body. We're seeing a lot of very, very strong changes going on with our finances and our food and all kinds of, things that are going on there, especially because when Uranus is in retrograde, Uranus is extra unpredictable. So look to see if you've got anything near 23 degrees Taurus in your natal chart. Again, even if you don't, we're all experiencing that. All right, so here's Jupiter going through the sign of Gemini. This is until this summer as well. So Jupiter, as I mentioned in so many other videos, Jupiter's been in Gemini since last summer, since last May, I think. Now, Jupiter is the great benefic who brings abundance. Jupiter loves wisdom, okay? Jupiter wants to expand the consciousness. Jupiter wants to study things that are philosophical, okay? And Gemini is the student who pays attention to the facts. Gemini, it's like we've got the professor in the student's house. Okay, so this could be, especially if you got something near 12 degrees Gemini. Yes, Jupiter is in retrograde, but still, this is a really good time for studying things. I keep mentioning that in videos, but it really is. It's a good one for it, especially because Jupiter is squaring Venus. Okay, this could also be, since Jupiter, okay, the sign of Gemini it's the sign of communication. And while Jupiter is retrograding through that sign of communication, it might, especially if this is hitting something in your chart, it might not be the most ideal time for communicating that, super important thing that you've been, has been on your mind. In fact, I don't know that this full moon would be a really good time for, let's say you've got a situation going on in your life where I have a lot of clients who are going through this. Something going on in your life where it needs to be talked about. You need to go to the other person or the group of people or whatever it is and talk about the situation. I don't know that this is necessarily the best transit for that. I think I would probably wait at least a week till after this transit is over to have that very important conversation. But overall, it could be a good time to be reevaluating the situation before you go and talk to the people or the person that you need to talk to. Okay, lastly, the South Node here. So the South Node, again, the North Node over here just moved into the sign of Pisces. The South Node just moved into the sign of Virgo. They're going to be there for a year and a half. They'll be there till July of 2026. The South Node is the drain point. Like if you want to know more about this, I already put a video out about the nodal transit, I think I called it. But that sign of Virgo, it's a sign of physical health and also have a lot to do with being of service. But the South Node is like a drain point that takes things away. I do think this next year and a half is going to be a really, really important time that we all take extra care of our physical health. The sign of Virgo actually rules the intestines and the liver and also has an influence on the gallbladder. Okay, so it's like the drain point, the weak point is going through this sign that rules over these very, very important parts of our physical body. And look to see if you've got anything near 29 degrees Virgo. And honestly, if you've got anything in the sign of Virgo, period, just realize over this next year and a half, there's going to be something that's draining that stuff out, okay? And it just depends on what it is and how it's aspected in your chart. Okay, I think I will leave that there. Now, let's talk about body parts. So the sign of Cancer rules the breasts, and this is the chest, okay? It rules, it's for men and for women, rules that area of the body. It also has a very big influence on the stomach, also has a little bit of on certain parts of the lungs. I don't know that I want to put too much emphasis on that. It's more, I would say the breast, also the sign of Cancer rules the elbows. So these parts of our body, you just might want to be a little bit extra careful with. Sign of Cancer can also have an influence on all the waters in the body or all the fluids in the body. Okay, but I think probably the one that I want to focus on most is, let's start with, I know a lot of people who are born with stuff in the sign of Cancer, especially women born with stuff in the sign of Cancer, can deal with issues with the breasts, cysts in the breasts, lumps in the breasts, all sorts of things like that. Now, I'm not a doctor and I can't offer any kind of medical advice whatsoever, but what I will talk about is things that I have really benefited from myself and learned from my wonderful teachers over the years. This particular, what I'm about to talk about here, comes from a lecture at NORWAC 2022 by Judith Hill, who's like the world-renowned medical astrologer. Okay, so this right here, I'm getting low on them and I was so sad. It is red clover, okay? And part of the reason I'm doing this, Sarah, if you are watching this, you know who you are, and you asked me to share more information about the herbs that I harvest myself. Okay, so red clover grows in a lot of locations. Grows up in Canada, grows all over the place. Maybe not in every single location, but you might want to see if red clover grows in your area. If not, you could probably grow it there. Okay, and they're like these little, sometimes they're more red, sometimes they're more like a purple color. These ones were a little more purple, and they look like little fuzz balls, okay? But they're actually clovers. Like they're actually, most people know what a clover looks like, but these are red clovers that have these little reddish or purplish fuzz balls that grow up. Now, those are said to be really helpful for issues with the breast, cysts in the breast, lumps in the breast, that sort of thing. And what I've done, I make a tea with this very often, but tinctures, I talk about tinctures all the time. So this right here, you can see right here, this was from May 22nd, 2023. I think I remember doing this. I put them in, I started the tincture process when the moon was transiting, I think waxing through the sign of Cancer. Anywho, it was a new moon in Cancer. It was just after a new moon in Cancer. I think that's what it was. No. Couldn't have been that. But the moon was waxing through the sign of Cancer. Anyway, so when I talk about tinctures, it's most people use either brandy or vodka. I get my alcohol, most of it anyway, from a place that's called the Oregon Organic Alcohol Company. It's in Medford. Well, actually, the company itself is in Ashland, Oregon. But you'd have to, if you go pick it up for yourself, you pick it up in Medford, Oregon, which is a beautiful drive from where I live. So I love doing that. But you take it has to be a very strong alcohol. You harvest the herbs for most herbs, I'm going to say, which I'm not necessarily the ultimate, I've definitely had my experiences and done this for years and that sort of thing. But there's people who know a whole heck of a lot more on making tinctures than I do. I've just been learning from other people over the years. But you take the fresh herb, preferably. You can do it with the dried herb as well. But if you take the fresh herb, it still has the waters in it. And so the water-soluble medicines can still be absorbed. Anyway, you put it in the alcohol. It's like, if I was going to make it with this right here, I'd want to put the alcohol up to about here, preferably using it in a jar that it fit better into. But you want to make sure that the herbs are completely covered in the alcohol. Okay. And I usually just shake it around a few times a day for like the first couple weeks that it's sitting in there. And it extracts the medicine from the herbs into, that's what this is. This is alcohol. This particular alcohol was made with grape spirits. And it's medicinal because it pulled the medicine of the red clover out and put it into the alcohol. And then what you do is you dilute it. Every tincture is a little bit different. Sometimes it's like 60% water, 40% of the actual alcohol medicine. It just kind of depends. And, honestly, the way we learn is from experimenting with this stuff in the first place. But you would want to dilute it because otherwise you're just pouring alcohol into your mouth. But this is, after diluting it, I put it into a little tincture bottle like this, and just a couple times a day, I take that tincture. So that is definitely my favorite thing to indulge in when it comes to anything transiting through the sign of Cancer. Again, I'm going to get really specific. My moon and Mars are conjunct in the 8th house in the sign of Cancer. Some of you know what that means, and some of you may not. Another thing to talk about is the stomach. Okay, so a lot of times with the stomach, with the sign of Cancer, a lot of people will it's from emotional stuff. Like there's something emotional going on, and they'll get a literal stomach ache. And for that, from my experience and just from what I've learned over the years, again, I can't offer any medical advice, but chamomile tea. It's like you can buy that literally in any regular grocery store or preferably a health food store. I do highly recommend using organic though. It's like, I understand not everybody's going to have every little thing that goes in their mouth be organic, which I totally understand that. Got to, have some kind of flexibility in our life. But when it comes to herbal teas, I think that's probably the thing that is extremely important, that it's organic, because the herbs are so sensitive to the pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides and all that bad stuff. Okay, so chamomile tea, organic chamomile tea could be great. What was the other one I was going to mention here? Oh, Angelica Archangelica, which is, what I love about it is it's basically a traditional Nordic medicine, which is a beautiful flower. I don't have any to show you. You can just look it up for yourself. That can be really good for a lot of different things, but it can also be like relieving to the stomach, relieving to issues with the stomach. If you actually look into this stuff, it's such a beautiful flower. It's good for a lot of different things, stress and anxiety, emotions, that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure you could just order that online. I think it traditionally comes from Norway, and I happen to be Norwegian and Swedish, so a very Nordic bloodline here. So I definitely like to dabble into the Angelica Archangelica sometimes. I don't have any at this moment, but so that's what I'm going to be doing for myself is the red clover. I'll probably have mix it in with some chamomile. All right, now gemstones. The dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Cancer is pearls, which the only reason I have pearls is because my lovely grandmother, thank you, grandmother. Pearls are, I know a lot of people say that Moonstone is Cancer's dedicated birthstone, but traditionally it is pearls. And I totally get it. Pearls are not necessarily in style. It's pretty freaking rare that we see women walking around with pearls on these days, unless you're part of the royal family, which is interesting because if you know anything about the royal family, you understand that the bloodline is very, very important to them. The blood period is very important, like traditionally to the royal family. Okay. And pearls are actually said to be protectors of the blood. Very, very interesting, right? I think I will probably put my pearls on top of my journal after my journal entry, but a few other to mention here. So this is Moonstone. There's also, which I should have grabbed, there's a white moonstone that I just learned this again fairly recently. That's not actual moonstone. I think it might be called rainbow moonstone, but don't quote me on that. It's a white colored, what people call moonstone, but it's not actually moonstone. It's actually white labradorite. Okay, so keep that in mind. But this is real moonstone. Moonstone is wonderful if you are working on how to process your emotions in a healthy way, but not if you are already going through something that's severely emotional, unless you've already done the work. Because what Moonstone can do, say you're going through a breakup or divorce or something like that, or a loss of a loved one, that sort of thing, and emotions are super high, unless you have seriously set the intentions to go, okay, I want to sit through this and I want to feel these emotions to my core, then you might want to work with Moonstone. But if you're just like, I don't want to feel this anymore, on a higher level than what I'm already feeling, Moonstone might not be the most ideal stone to work with. Another one to mention here is Carnelian. Carnelian resonates beautifully with the sign of Cancer. And by the way, where I get most of this information from is the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall, but I've also learned stuff through the Academy for Astrological Medicine and other books. But Carnelian, I think, is mostly recognized for working through like sexual trauma. Okay, but that's obviously an emotional thing. And I know it's honestly, it's so tragic because I cannot tell you it's absolutely ridiculous. Just being what I do for a living, and I hear a lot of stories from people. It seems like the majority of women and some men as well, but mostly the majority of women have had to experience some kind of sexual trauma in their lifetime. And so that's part of the reason I brought Carnelian out, because it does resonate beautifully with the sign of Cancer, but it can kind of just be good for working through emotional stuff, period, but especially if it's got to do with some kind of sexual trauma. So those are the stones that I'm going to be working with. with this full moon. Again, I always leave an extensive list below. So if you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit ErinWaageAstrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.